We light the first candle to honor Judaism. When God had finished showing human beings the earth, he said to them, "See how beautiful my world is. I created it for your sake. Take care of my world and do not destroy it, for if you do, there will be no one else to repair it." We light the second candle to honor Christianity. A Psalm of David. "The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, the world and they that dwell therein." We light the third candle to honor Taoism. Nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. We light the fourth candle to honor Hinduism. Let there be peace in the sky and in the atmosphere. Let there be peace in the planet world and in the forests. Let the cosmic powers be peaceful. Let the Brahman, the true essence and source of life, be peaceful. Let there be undiluted and fulfilling peace everywhere. We light the fifth candle to honor Buddhism. If we are going to save this planet, we need to seek a new ecological order, to look at the life we lead and then work together for the benefit of all. Unless we work together, no solution can be found. By moving away from self-centeredness, we can help decrease much of the suffering in the world. We light the sixth candle to honor the spirituality of the Sioux. The frog does not drink up the pond in which he lives. And we light the final candle to honor the religion of the Kikiyu. You must treat the earth well. It was not given to you by your parents. It is loaned to you by your children. Today's reading comes from our founder, Ernest Holmes. We are, therefore, members of the universe, and being members of that which unites everything, we are some part of each other. So join me in a moment of silence, please, as we contemplate today's reading. And centered here in this moment, I unite my consciousness with everyone here, knowing that in doing so we are united with the consciousness of God, that there is but one. And living in this space of oneness and wholeness, knowing that we are a part of each other and a part of everything. I simply celebrate today. I celebrate this service, knowing we are all here by divine appointment, knowing that everything said and done today is both blessed and a blessing. We simply say, thank you, God. Thank you to the infinite Spirit, to the One, for this day and this moment. And so it is.
And so it is.
Ta-da! Yay! I always like it when the mic works. So here we are. The very first idea, maybe the very foundation of what we teach here is that there is only one, right? That there's one life and one beingness that fills the whole universe, and that we're connected through that one, as that one. We're all part of this interwoven community, and so each part, if you will, is dependent on the rest. And when we realize that and embody that, we are changed, deeply changed. Just the deep realization of how connected we are, how we're all interwoven, how we are interbeing with each other, lets us think differently. It gives us a different perspective. And everything that we see, what we experience in the world, is a result of that perspective. So when we enlarge our perspective and realize that, the air that we breathe, the oxygen that we breathe, somebody thousands of years ago breathed out some carbon dioxide, and some plants turned it into oxygen, and here we are breathing it, and some plant will breathe in what we're breathing out, and in the future some human being will breathe in the oxygen that those plants put out. It's kind of like that. It's a continuous, dependent interbeing for all of us. And when we really realize that, it gives us a different perspective to realize we're part of this community that we call Earth. that we're one with it all, that we're one with all the very life of the planet. It gives us a different perspective, so we see differently, we believe differently, we think differently, we change our inner state. And a changed inner state, of course, results in us being different, right, in the world, and experiencing differently in the world, as well as just inside our own selves. So this month our topic is stewardship of the planet, and the book that we're using is called Spiritual Ecology, A Cry of the Earth. It's a collection of essays by all kinds of people. Everything from a Sufi sheikh to a climate activist, to Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist teacher, to Pierre Vilayat Khan, who brought Sufism to the West, on and on and on and on and on. There are lots of people. But it's all looking at the world through a spiritual perspective. And one essay in the book I really like, I find very intriguing, is called Medicine for the Earth. And it's written by a shaman whose name is Sandra Ingerman. And I was struck because what she writes in that essay is so in line with what we teach here. For example, she says, the outer world we live in is a reflection of our inner state of consciousness. Yeah, sounds really familiar, doesn't it? And in shamanism, it is understood that thoughts are substantial things. It is also understood that words are seeds. Another very familiar idea. And finally, it is who we become that changes the world. Another familiar idea. And let's be really clear. We have to change who we become on this planet because it can't continue on its present trajectory, right? It cannot. Ingerman comments in her essay that many of us are hoping for magic. We want magic to fix the problems. We want magic to change everything in the outer world so we'll be okay and we don't have to do any interchange, right? But we know that if there's outer change without inner change, it crumbles away. It's the inner change that supports the outer change and stabilizes and sustains the outer change. It changes everything once we make that inner change, once we begin to see the deep interconnection with everything on the planet. In our society, the way it's been constructed and lived and pushed, we've lost the ability to recognize that deep connection. We've disconnected in so many ways. You know, we live in air-conditioned houses and we work in air-conditioned buildings, and even our cars protect us from what's going on outside. We don't feel what's happening in the air around us and the earth below us. And unless you're Lenza, rarely do our bare feet touch the soil or the grass, right? Rarely do we let ourselves stand on naked earth and feel what's going on. Many of us have not noticed that the bird song in the morning is much quieter now than it used to be. But I did notice it, and I wondered about it, and just the other day I read an article from a lot of organizations, including the Audubon Society. There are 3 billion fewer birds in North America than there were 50 years ago. 3 billion. It's no wonder the bird song is quieter in the morning, right? And so much of what happens is far away. It's not in our front yards, so we don't notice it. I mean, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a big hurricane in the Bahamas, but we've already forgotten about it. It's not in our front yard. But yesterday, I read an article entitled, America's Great Climate Exodus is Starting in the Florida Keys. It's a story about Marathon Key. A couple of years ago, Hurricane Irma did a lot of damage down there. And what the state is doing is paying people for their property, sending them away and bulldozing everything because the next hurricane will just tear it up again. They're saying, don't resettle. We're going to pay you for your house, get out of here. It's amazing. We can't stay separate from that for very long, can we? It's right there. It's on our southern our southern doorway in Florida. And we can't expect, as Sandra Ingerman points out, that science will come up with miracles to cure all this. We want disease and aging and the climate crisis all to be cured by scientists, but that's sort of like putting a Band-Aid on a person who's having a massive heart attack, right? It doesn't work. We need in the world this deeper, larger, spiritual healing, I think, and that's what will create a world that sustains us, and a world that sustains all life, as our great organizational vision says, a world that works for everybody and all life. But only when we come to believe and see and feel this deep interconnection with each other, with all the life on the planet, with the mountains and the waters and everything. We have to come to believe we're part of a community here on Earth, our planet. And in this philosophy, we say once we embody a belief, our experience begins to change. So what we're really after is trying to embody this belief that we're connected with everything, that we're interbeing with everything. And then our worldview changes, and our ethics change, and our behavior changes, and our perception changes, everything changes. And that is what we have evolved to be able to do. It's amazing. We have that capacity. We've evolved into the mental and spiritual capacity and maturity to embody that unity, to understand paradox, to see that, yes, we are individualizations and unity is the way things are at the same time, right? We understand what that means. It means that even while I may perceive myself as separate from Lenza, I'm always interchanging atoms with her and molecules all the time, right? And there is no separation between Lenza and me from a spiritual sense, from a mental sense, even from a physical sense, because we're always interchanging molecules. We start to see more readily and deeply into the nature of things, which is an expansion of the way we see normally. We have learned to see. It's also a relearning of the fundamentals that all humans once knew when they lived on the earth, when their feet touched the earth every day, when they gathered water from springs and they gathered the plants and ate them. It's a relearning of what it means to be a human being and a member of a society and part of a family and part of a community and one with all, one with the whole community of life. And spiritually speaking, that's all driven by the evolutionary impulse of life itself, because life wants to live, right? And living means expressing, and living means changing, and living means exploring, and living means being all that life can be. That's what life wants to do, and that's what moves us forward into viewing ourselves instead of isolated as one with. We realize that we're not isolated individuals and competing nations. We have a common origin story. We have a common and shared destiny. And our shared destiny, if we don't make some changes, is that most of us and most of everything on the planet will disappear like those 3 billion birds did. It's a big deal. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness are being redefined subtly and slowly, because life means life. You know, life has to continue in order to pursue it, right? It includes the life of everything. Freedom requires us to not only recognize that we are free, but that we're bound by the consequences of what we do. So when we do stuff that takes away the life of another being or of the planet, guess what? We're less free because it redounds on us. The pursuit of happiness means that if we all aren't allowed to have the common good, if only some of us have it, there's not much happiness. There's not enough to go around, because we won't be here, frankly. We won't be here to be happy. There's this planetary consciousness that's being birthed. It's birthing a planetary civilization rather than, a tribe or a clan or a single nation. It's birthing the idea that this whole planet is unfolding in the context of the journey of the universe, not just the journey of the United States or the journey of China. It's the journey of the universe. And so just in the nick of time, we're getting conscious enough to be able to hold that deep paradox that diversity and unity are happening at the same instant, and they are both true. That we're part of the process of forward evolution as well as an enormous influence on that evolution at the same time. That we're members of a life community called Earth as well as individualized, unique, fabulous expressions of life. All of that is true at the very same time. And I think we've finally become mature enough to realize that the planet's been around for 4 billion years, and we've been around for less than 0.05% of that time. Not very long, right? And we've become humble enough to understand ourselves in that context and know that we shouldn't mess around too much with what it took 4 billion years to create. 4.5 billion, all of life, right? We have to be careful when we start to mess with that magnitude of a process. And eventually, when we can let this story of the universe and its birth and its evolution and its trajectory towards life, when we can let that be our story, then it's an inspiring vision for us. We can hold it up in front of us and be pulled by it, right? Be pulled by it instead of being pushed by fear. We can be pulled by this vision that life wants to live and life wants to evolve, and the whole universe is geared that way. When we understand that we're kin with all life, then we want to sustain the future of all life. It's a vision that we can hold out in front of us. When we understand how personally and intimately we are interwoven, those aren't my molecules anymore, they're lenses. And lenses are mine, right? We are totally interwoven, and we trade things off like that all the time. Energy and actual physical molecules and all that stuff. When we start to realize how interwoven we are into the very fabric of life, then we start to understand what it means to be stewards of that life. And that's what lets us move from, as we talked last week, being against something to being for life. We stand for life, for the life that we're all part of. Of course we do, right? If we're part of it, how can we stand against it? It's sort of like the divine stands for all of us because we're all part of the divine. And the divine cannot stand against any part of itself, right? We can't stand against our left hands or our right hands. That would be crazy. So how can we be against any part of this life that's part of who we are and that we're part of? I think the most arresting thing in the essay by the shaman is this one line that made me catch my breath. She says, and again, it's exactly what we teach. From a spiritual perspective, the toxicity we see in our environment is a reflection of our own inner toxicity. Woo! Makes you sit up and take note, doesn't it? But if all that she's talking about and all we're teaching is true, so's that. That is true as well. And so we have to learn to deal with our inner toxicity, our inner separation, our insistence that I'm separate from all of you. And what happens to you doesn't touch me, and what happens to me doesn't touch you. It does. It does, right? One way or another, it touches us. We just lost dear Dwight King, and my husband stood up in the memorial service yesterday and said, Dwight was my friend, and I'm going to miss him. We're touched by that. We're also touched when we see somebody suffering or going hungry or sleeping on the streets, because they're kind of like our our brother or our sister, and there they are in a really dire strait. When we understand that 3 billion birds have disappeared because the life of the planet couldn't sustain them, it means something to us in our very cells, in our deepest level. And so, it's this inner toxicity of separation and anger and judgment and making anything not like us the other that we have to clear up, we have to clean up, we have to purify. We can't make anyone or anything other than we are, whether it's a mountain or a person, whether it's an animal or a tree, whether it's an ocean or another human being. We have to work at embodying and understanding and believing this interbeing, this interwovenness, this interdependence on everything else. Because when we do that, when we clear up the inner toxicity, we know exactly what to do, right? We're guided by a vision to be different, to think differently, to see differently. We know the words to speak. We know the actions to take. We know how to extend our vision of healthy community to include all, to include the birds and the trees and the planet and the animals and the rivers and the oceans and the lakes and each other, no matter where we come from or who we are. But how? How do you start? How do you start? I think we start with gratitude for the life, for all that life brings to us and for us, We embrace the consciousness that lets us hear the birds sing in the morning and see the sky and perceive the beauty that's everywhere. The beauty of the oceans and the mountains and the paths through the forest and the changing leaves and all that stuff. We begin by holding a strong intention that each of us know deeply our place in this community and in this love and in this life, this community of all life. And so we let that love start to transform our hearts because there's miraculous energy that lives in our hearts, right? And we can let that out. We can let that out into the world. We arrive at harmony within because of our spiritual practice and because of our vision of what we want to see in the world. When we're living in harmony within, we live in harmony without, right? We do. We use our imaginations to see an environment that is clean and healthy and sustaining, that supports all life, that supports everything in the oceans and everything in the skies and everything on the planet. And we start to dream a new dream of connection, of love, of interwoven support, of community, because that new dream is what creates a new earth. And I think we have to remember that we don't do this by ourselves. There's a whole community around the planet, millions of people who are doing this same work. There's so many in our world today who understand the power of intention and the power of focus and the power of embodiment and the power of inner harmony and the power of love and the power of community. There are millions and millions and millions. If you don't think so, consider 1 year ago, our Swedish friend Greta Thunberg was sitting outside the Swedish parliament by herself, striking for the climate. And yesterday she was joined by, over the weekend, she was joined by 4 million people striking for the climate. Amazing. In a year, right? In a year. There is so much going on out there. There's an ever-growing community of people who feel in our bones the very life of the universe and who feel it all around us and who feel the life of the community around us. And we let ourselves feel the power of this spiritual collective that we belong to. And then we can get up the next day and set an intention and look at our vision and clear up any toxicity that's remaining and move forward. That's what helps us awaken from this collective trance of hopelessness and separation and despair and fear and addiction to stuff that has brought us to this moment. We start to feel the evolutionary changes that have made us possible now to stand on new ground. and look in new directions and move in new ways and have hope and strength and intention and vision to look into the future. And when we feel that way, we get up and change things. We get up and do things differently. We get up and change when we change our insides, we change our individual lives. Then we go out into the world and we make a little change here and a little change here and a little change here, and every single change makes the world a little bit better, a little bit more supported, a little bit more full of life. And we do that, and everything changes. As Margaret Mead said, never doubt that a small group of committed individuals can change the world. It's the only thing that ever has. So when we do that, our community as a whole becomes a little more peaceful and a little more abundant and a little more filled with grace. And we all benefit from that. Linda benefits and I benefit. And you benefit and the ocean benefits. And the mountains benefit and Dan benefits. We all benefit when that peace and that life-giving love is present. So I used this 2 weeks ago, but I want to close again with the words of John Seed. May we turn inwards and stumble upon our true roots in the intertwining biology of this exquisite planet. May nourishment and power pulse through these roots, and fierce determination to continue the billion-year dance.